What do we take from nature? What do we give? How do we understand and improve our relationship with it? These are the questions that drove Sophie Pavelle, writer, explorer and science communicator, to write To Have or To Hold, her latest book. How it ended up being about parasitic barnacles, even she can only partially explain.
I think we're in so many subconscious ways distancing ourselves from nature and seeing ourselves as totally separate, totally dominant, totally apart from the natural world that has created us and fed us and nourished us in ways that we'll never truly know. And I think symbiosis again teaches us many lessons, but it's a stark reminder that we are just part of it all. We are part of the same thread that binds this life together, and I think language and storytelling can play a huge part in reconnecting us back.
I'm Chris from Canopy and Stars, and this is A Life More Wild. Join Sophie now as she walks in some of her favourite woodland and discusses confused crabs, symbiosis, and the power of positivity.
So we are currently walking downstream of the River Tean. We're in the Tean Gorge, which is one of my favourite places in the world. It is not only just an absolutely beautiful place of ancient woodland, but it's also the site of the largest restoration projects of woodland in the entire country. So a huge collaborative effort between the Woodland Trust and the National Trust, aiming to bring back ancient, thriving, deciduous trees and woodland connectivity. And it's also the site of a lot of memory for me. I have a lot of nostalgia here of childhood and childhood walks and growing up, really. So we're just coming right next to the River Tean now, which is a really important site for all kinds of species, especially the Atlantic salmon. So yeah, we're in a really, really special place. Woodland is really, really important to Britain's legacy as an island nation, as an archipelago. We once had so much forest covering the mainland and many of our islands as well, but over not that long in the last century, that's been confined to smaller scattered fragments. So I think we have between 2 to 4% of our natural ancient woodland cover left in this country, which is devastating in a way and has a huge ripple effect to all the species who depend on woodland for survival. And temperate rainforests especially once carpeted 20% of mainland Britain and now is confined to less than 1% of its former range on the kind of western fringes of mainland Britain. And temperate rainforest is a habitat that I think many people overlook and forget and are shocked that we have such a habitat that sounds so exotic in this country. And it's reliant on a very specific set of environmental conditions and atmospheric conditions in order to thrive, and is kind of defined by the species who thrive within and underneath its canopy. And here in Fingal Woods and in the Tean Gorge, we have some remnants of those scattered pockets of temperate rainforest left, which is really precious and really critical to restore. And so that's part of the restoration effort here, is to try and rejuvenate and revive those remaining pieces of temperate rainforest. One of my favourite species that defines the temperate rainforest is a species of lichen known as lungwort lichen. And I came to know this species through researching for my second book, To Have or To Hold, because it's an amazing example of completely different species coming together and colliding their lives together, colliding their DNA together in order to survive. And so we've got a fungus which provides the structure, we've got a photosynthesizing green algae, and we've got a photosynthesizing bacteria called a cyanobacteria, and they need one another in this kind of dynamic throuple to become and thrive as lichen. And so in that, it kind of defies every definition that you might have of lichen, which is normally made up of 2 species, whereas lungwort has decided to have double the photosynthesizing power. And in that, it's just one of the most remarkable species that we're lucky to have here in our country. So this fallen tree that's blocking the path is an oak tree that came down in one of the storms a few months ago in the winter. But I think we've just learned to adapt and walk our way around it like we're doing now. And you can actually cycle on here. So this is one of my favourite gravel biking routes that I can do from home. And it's always quite fun shooting around the tree there. And I always think I'm not going to make it. And then shoot out the other side and think, oh, I did it. But yeah, it's just lush. I love it here. One of the things that's really special about being in a woodland like this is that it's changing all the time. So not only are the communities of plants and animals and fungi who live here changing all the time, but for me it's the light as well. And we've got the river running to our left, downstream towards Teignmouth eventually, and the light is playing across the water and changing every few minutes. And the light's shining through on the bottom and revealing the kind of very iron-coloured water that is very distinctive of a river that flows from the headwaters on the moor, and that comes from that peaty bog moorland. So it gives it that kind of reddish, rusty colour. And then we've got dapples of light sort of spotlighting areas of moss on fallen trees, and I think it's just a lovely reminder that in a woodland, death and life are very entwined and are in a symbiosis with one another and feed off one another, and I find that very inspiring and comforting in equal measure. And we're coming to the end of a very sunny, very dry May, and the canopy above us is in full vibrant green, and the river's actually quite low because we've had one of the driest springs in 100 years, which is a different story in itself. But yeah, it's just so luscious and green at the moment, and we've got brand new ferns coming up, we've got oak saplings revealing their new leaves. Yeah, it's just full of life here. Yeah, so To Have or to Hold centres around the theme of relationships. So whether that's relationships between species, our relationship with the planet, and also our relationship with one another. And I use the really beautiful, kind of brutal lens of symbiosis through which to view the theme of relationships. So symbiosis is the kind of stunning situation where completely different species have evolved to live together to survive. What arises is when species come together, like a flower and a bee, for example, who have evolved to live together in a very famous partnership. It's not an equal partnership. So one species is always getting slightly more from the relationship than the other, but in that nature has found this amazing balance that has been sustained for millions of years, where both species are getting something from the other, but it's not equal, but it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. So symbiosis is not good versus bad. It is this kind of natural flux of give and take and resource flow. And so once I started to get my head into that world and think, well, actually, the more we look, the more we see, the more we realise that everything is interconnected in nature and everything is touching something else, the more I became fascinated at why this hasn't been explored enough, and why, when we're talking about interconnectedness and our relationship with nature, the lessons we can learn from how nature does it are infinite. And so I profile 8 symbiotic relationships that are found across the British Isles that are all threatened or influenced by climate change in some way, with the underlying question of, well, what can these relationships teach us as to how to live better alongside the planet, and how to exist in that state of exploitation and flux in a bit more of a sustainable way. And the big surprise to me quite early on is I ended up, without realising at first, writing a book about parasites. And parasites are the dominant form of species in a symbiotic relationship. Over half of all animal life relies on a parasitic form of survival, so where the suffering of one species enables the survival of another. And parasitism is everywhere. It's in our bodies, it's in a woodland, it's in the river, it's in the sea, in the soil, in the sky. And it suddenly presented a new way of looking at how we can be better to the planet. And I started to notice all these kind of concerning but very interesting parallels between how a parasite goes about their, in quote, dirty work, and how we conduct ourselves on this planet in an almost parasitic sense. But the amazing thing about parasites is that they are masters of this sustainable exploitation. They only take what they need from the host. They do not want to kill the host, and yet we here on the planet are in danger of taking so much from our host, Mother Earth, the planet, whatever you want to call it, that we're reaching a tipping point now. And so it felt very important to me to be spotlighting nature's relationships at a time where I feel like our relationship with the planet is really, really on the rocks. I mean, every day there's something new that I see in the news about how we've gone too far. The ice sheets are melting, temperature rising. I said earlier that we're in one of the driest springs for a century, and we desperately need rainfall. And yet the Met Office is also predicting extreme rainfall throughout June, and so we seem to be swinging, doing 180s all the time between extreme weather and not enough of this and too much of that. And I think those are all symptomatic of the way that we have pushed the planet to its limits, such that and I write in the book, the planet's kind of writhing in pain and rearing her head, and even in her agony there are still moments where she holds us and cares for us and gives us resources to use and water to drink and safe refuge and seasons that guide our agriculture and our food production and all of this. And so, the planet is sending us warnings and reminders that we're pushing it too far. When I sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed with, the state of nature and the state of the crisis, just coming to a place like this is literally a grounding experience. And I think it will never get old, just getting outside and being around trees especially. There's something about trees that I think really calms our nervous systems and sort of clarifies stuff, such that we leave a woodland feeling kind of in a state of, okay, we've got this, like there is hope, we can do it, we know what to do, we just need to kind of get our heads together and tell the right stories and galvanise the right people, and we can give nature a brighter future. I think there's absolutely a place and a desperate need to be telling positive stories about nature and using that positivity and that empathy to galvanise a connection and a restored relationship with it. That's certainly my method of delivery when it comes to science communication, when it comes to writing, because I think conservation for too long has had this image of being doom and gloom and trying to use scaremongering tactics and shock tactics to shock people into action, to shock people into donating money for a cause. That doesn't work because it makes people feel rubbish. And, it's no surprise that when you look at psychology research that shows how much more powerfully information is retained and recalled and regurgitated in conversation if it was delivered and packaged up in a way that made the person who was receiving that information feel good about themselves and feel positive. And that's where I think that humour especially is a secret weapon when it comes to communicating difficult, complex topics about the climate, about biodiversity loss, about our place in amongst it all. And I've had lots of readers over the last couple of years write to me and say, I felt guilty for laughing out loud. And, I wasn't expecting to read a book about climate change that was gritty and hard-hitting, but also made me laugh. And I think in that, it's a kind of disarming tactic to try and make people feel powerful and feel happy and joyful. And I think when you're in that headspace and in that mindset, when you are hit with the hard stuff, the gritty facts, the difficult truths, you wake up to them a bit more and you listen a bit more. And I think it kind of clears the mud in your mind a little bit. It certainly does for me. If I've laughed at something, it kind of makes me feel a bit lucid. And then if I'm hit with some important information that I need to listen to, I hear it better. And so nature's just full of stories and full of materials. And I think translating them in a way that is hopefully positive but powerful is, I feel very privileged to be in a position to do that. I mean, there are so many, but one of them that seems to have particularly captivated readers recently is to do with the shore crab, which is a species I think we're all familiar with. It's very nostalgic. It's kind of sweet seaside, a sweet seaside image of happy crabbing in a summer holiday. But this crab is a favourite host of a species of parasitic barnacle called a saculina barnacle. That's its Latin name, but it's easy enough to say that it's kind of become its common name. But this also, the colloquial name for this barnacle as well, in the last year or so, has become the body snatcher, which is all very exciting and dramatic. So this barnacle looks nothing like a barnacle that you would associate with like rock pooling or anything like that. It looks and it behaves almost like a fungus. So it seeks out the body of an adult shore crab in the form of a larvae, so a tiny microscopic thing, invades the body of a shore crab, and then its method of growth throughout the body of a shore crab is like spreading like a fungus with tendrils and rootlets and raiding the body of a crab in a very systemic way. And then it emerges on the outside of the crab as a false egg burden. So the crab, I'm going to pretend to be a crab here, looks down and would say, "Oh, I'm pregnant. How did that happen? Oh well, let's just go with it and look after it and give it everything it needs," and as they would their own. So they've been fooled into thinking they're pregnant, and by doing so they're caring for the parasite without knowing. So the parasite's there like, "Thank you very much, I'm getting all the resources I need, I'm being looked after." Then when the parasite has grown to a point where it can drop off the host crab and go and reproduce and live on, it does so, and it leaves the body of a crab. And what's amazing is that, yes, there's plenty of research to show that the crab is affected in a negative way, feels probably not very good after, feels a bit rubbish. The crab in many cases can survive and reproduce and live on themselves after this huge ordeal of having their body raided by a barnacle. And it's an example of this, as I said in the beginning, this kind of balance and exploitation where, you know, it's never equal. The parasite was clearly gaining quite a lot there, but then the crab is also gaining if it can survive and reproduce and contribute to its own biodiversity. And so it's this sustainability in that parasites tell us is possible in how to go about giving and taking when interacting with the species around us. And I'll never look at the crab in quite the same way again. But it's such a common occurrence that it's likely that we've all at some point seen a shore crab that has at some point in its life been parasitized by a barnacle in this way. And I just find that amazing, because I think, well, what else are we missing? What else have we seen but not truly acknowledged or bothered to look at again? And so symbiosis, it binds the world together, and it definitely, I think, for me at least, illuminates Earth and our planet as she was meant to be seen. We're walking back upstream now, and we've just come to a clearing, and so there are a bit more significant openings in the canopy, and so the sun's really pouring through at this point, but you can still hear the river, which I really love. And I love it when you can't really tell whether the rush in the background is the river or the canopy and the leaves rustling. So, but yeah, we've kind of opened up into a area of meadow, and it's one of the sort of highlights of childhood was coming and having a picnic here and just staying here for hours and hours and falling asleep on the grass. So this is, there's a lot of nostalgia here, as I said. There's butterflies out. So there's loads of really good butterflies here, actually. There's some good fritillaries, and my butterfly knowledge is not great, but it's always lovely to see them, especially as I think last year was one of the worst years for butterfly numbers in Britain. So seeing them playing around and fighting with each other as well is always quite a nice, hopeful dose. I think when it comes to reconnecting with nature, that's a very personal endeavour, And I think what looks like nature connection for one person could mean a completely different thing for someone else. And so yes, for me, coming in a place like this, in a place like the woods, or dunking my head under the water in the sea for a few minutes, that's my nature connection. And also writing is my nature connection, and that's something that was unexpected for me, but I feel very grateful that life has given me that curveball. But I think it's just finding what works for you, and that's an instinct that I can't really describe or label or prescribe for you. But I think it's one of those weird things where you kind of know it once you found it. And so if I had any advice, it would just be to get out and try different things and see what resonates, and whether that's going for a walk, or one of my favourite things to do is switch up your time spent outside in terms of the time of day. So sunrise and sunset are some of the best ways to experience nature in the absence of people, because not anyone's up or around really, especially at dawn, especially at this time of year with the dawn chorus. And I think it's that feeling of feeling small and feeling outnumbered by nature. And there's nothing better than dawn, I think, to give you a sense of that. And so, again, I think that's quite a visceral way of connecting with nature. But it can be through the books you're reading, the films you're watching, the conversations you're having, what you do in your spare time. A lot of people find gardening, and even as simple as just potting a houseplant or growing some herbs and then using them in your cooking or in teas or anything like that. I think that is a great way of physically, getting your hands dirty, getting dirt under your nails and connecting to nature. So I think it can look like a myriad of different things, and in that sense it's very exciting. I think it's finding what works for you and what might be sustainable for you and manageable in amongst what's probably no doubt a very busy, full life. So I think it's quality over quantity. Don't put yourself under pressure to suddenly have a eureka moment where you're suddenly connected to nature, because it probably won't manifest in that way. It might be a bit more subtle and a bit quieter.
As Sophie says, just get out there and find what works for you. Go for a walk, leap into the sea, and who knows, you might end up with a parasitic barnacle of your own. Or perhaps just a relationship with nature that works for both of you. We'll see you soon with another great guest on A Life More Wild, and remember to check out Quick Strolls, in which we examine ideas and issues that we've come across in previous episodes.